ladies and gentlemen. You are very welcome to this evening's event for Culture Night 2020. My name is Tanya Farrelly and I'm the director of Bray Literary Festival. So in the first of two events this evening to celebrate Culture Night, we are going to hear readings from our shortlisted readers for our poetry and flash fiction competitions. But first of all, we will hear from four young readers from our local Fighting Words group in Glencree. And the following people will be reading: Emma Darcy, Laura Malloy, Freya Rothwell and Sam Ferry. So you're very welcome, guys.
There are more than 400 billion stars in the known universe. Each one of these stars burns brilliantly and shines. The stars have a lot in common with humanity. When I sat there, staring out of a car window, face pressed against the glass, I could see just how beautiful they all were. From a glance, they were identical, each bright white. If I looked closer, close enough to see my breath on the glass, I would have seen their individuality. The way each star appeared to interact with the next, clustered into little groups. If I'd stopped to think, I might have thought they were friends. Then I might have noticed how they were all beautiful in their own right. The thing about the stars is their beauty is solitude, thousands of miles away the closer we look. Now though, I tell myself what they really are. A mass of elements reacting and burning. It's comforting to know though that I am made of that same stuff. Those same elements course through my veins and through the veins of all of humanity. We are, in our essence, stardust. Sometimes, though, I feel more like a supernova than a star. Beautiful for a time, but catastrophic. And condemned to burn myself out in a fiery blaze. But if I am truly made of stars, I am the universe, and the universe lives within me, just waiting to get out. I have worlds living inside of myself, and that makes me limitless. We all have the components of entire galaxies swimming under our skin.
We wished our worries would wash away. The boat smirked as if they already knew. The bridge hadn't changed, the faceless stones had flourished through. The sky and sea surrendered, two souls entwined as one. The seagulls did not quarrel, instead they sang along. Houses polar white, drained of colour, illustrated warmth, but did not share an invite. The clouds were clever, not clueless, for when the violent rain eased and the sun shone clear, it was time. You knew he was here.
Sometimes you have to take comfort in things that hurt you. I was stripped bare, an open wound. You decided to pour in the salt. Every silence with you was a word in another conversation. Behind my back, lost in translation. Sometimes you have to take comfort in things that teach you. I was small, soft, malleable. You made me a mold. Every talk with you was a step in the right direction. On my own path, lost in translation. And sometimes you take comfort in things that love you. I let myself be selfish just this once. You let me, encouraged me. Every touch and smile with you is a sign this is more than flirtation. And I hold your hand, lost in translation.
Alone in a void, I watch at peace. The world below, frozen, where time forgot, yet tempting, teeming with life, red, raw, hot. Raging bulls fighting, kicking, never cease. Above, a mythic land of sweet release. writhing together in a painful knot of passion and ecstasy. When there's naught else, they kill for their great final reprise. I stand in between, lost in confusion, at once repelled and attracted by both, with the best of each, but double the worst. Clouded in a mist of the illusion that I am alone, with no one to reach. Here I float, but I know I'm not the first.
And now we're going to hear from our shortlisted readers.
Hello, I'm John Bayliss Post, and this poem is about a cat, and you can find the cat in the Book of Kells at folio 34 recto. Cat. The door, wattle and hide, edges ajar for the cat. Her master lays a red ground around pricked outlines. He is good at cats, stylized, whimsical, motley, interlined, impromptu, but this cat is White Cat, his watchful companion. Sleek, she is no ascetic. He glimpses a distant curragh on the home tide. His mind hears the frantic scavenge, Fulmar, Kittiwake. Beside him, White Cat perches by the open window, lazily scanning for goldfinch. She hunts, sometimes. In remembrance, he sketches rats fighting for a sacred wafer, each rat's tail held by a cat, each cat rat-ridden. A metaphor, maybe, good and evil? Are there good rats? He's not a schoolman. Carefully he delineates his friend. The other cat counterbalances, filling space and harmonizing the conceit. The abbot says it looks like a sheep. He didn't reply. Heretic rats beset the granary, the stores, the kitchen chests, the aumbry. White Cat sits, comfortable, disdaining duty. She has no belief. She awaits scraps of dried fish in the polished yew-bowl he bought in a rainy market in Sangol. She sprawls across his table, nuzzles his smock, mews, preens on his bench, and then gets fed. Post hoc ergo propter hoc, she thinks. She is not a schoolman. After feeding, she fidgets, undecided. She nudges him as he tends his palate. A drop too much water, and the pigment swims in albumen. Patient with her, he adjusts the mix, works in a measured pinch of red lead, slowly strokes it into the fur of the brindled tabby. Letters shape-shift to the page, free of their words. Doodles distend with faces, tails, limbs. Then he scores more edges, lines trailing from boar's hairs gripped in a gull's quill and lipped to a point. White Cat snuggles beside his absorption, purring with language, replete as evening degrades colours, sunset soaking the reds for the moments before dusk. There are no cats in the Bible. She is not canonical. He half genuflects his abrupt devotions. She assesses the closing door, judges her moment, slinks outside. Busy wings sketch urgency. Rough shaded, the rusted stanchion of a breakwater long silted. Kelp, carrageen, racks flicker under the shadow. Existence as a trick of the light, faded with emptiness, a glimmer, a solipsistic blink. Black and white whistle, sunset bill skimming, no touchdown, no rest, low over the lapping surface under a refracted sunset. Alarm call, food found call, don't leave me behind call. crushed shivers, disjoined valves, gristled smears of muscle, fugitive mementos. The brief blur of mating interrupted for lugworms. That elusive stumble of ecstasy, that redigestion of waste, that fictive nanomoment, fluttered and cooed beside a pebbled roost. Ghosts of consciousness, cowed by the breeze, drift into the last pink cirrus. Freckled eggs for the otter.
Hi, I'm Amanda Bell, and my poem is called The Value of Cut Flowers. I'd like to thank Judge Brian Kirk for selecting the poem for the shortlist, and wish all the organisers the best of luck with the Bray Literary Festival this year. The Value of Cut Flowers. In mourning for the life I loved, I tried to recreate their gardens, my foremothers, women who knew the value of cut flowers. Women who, through wars, TB and polio, knew how to make a cutting strike and when to slice a spade through tangled roots. I can see their short-nailed fingers, their arthritis-blunted thumbs as they strip back leaf nodes of geraniums, nip side shoots from tomato plants, pinch out the first frail flowers to boost strong growth. They sieved their compost to fine tilth, snapped deadheads from blown roses, and when a tray of seedlings failed, began again, because things can catch up. They knew that after every flush, the border must subside, and seeded annuals to fill the gaps. From January snowdrops to Lenten roses in December, each month has its portion of misfortunes. Frost and infestation, gales that blast the apple buds, lay foxgloves flat, tear leaves from towering hollyhocks. This strange dry spring, when nothing's right, I do my best to propagate, inspect my softwood cuttings for white threads of tiny roots, and try, without the proper grit, to make the most of what I've got. Learn which plants will flourish, which survive.
Hello, my name is P.W. Bridgman, and I'm speaking to you from Vancouver, Canada. I'm going to read my flash fiction story, Unilateral Declaration. The story is an Irish story, and some of my ancestry is Irish. I travel to Ireland often, especially to South Derry, where my mother's maiden name is scattered everywhere, and where I feel strangely at home. But as is now obvious, I don't sound Irish. I'll just have to ask you to try to settle into the story, despite the distraction of my Canadian accent. So please bear with me. Unilateral Declaration. Guileless and smitten, in 1969 I turned my young hand to poetry the way I turned my tousled Donovan Leitch head toward the northwest whenever I passed our parlor window. Why? Because there was nothing else. Because that was all that could be done. Facing northwest from Elver Avenue, our parlor window offered the most paltry of views. Red roof tiles luminous in the faint distance. A wee sliver of a glimpse, really, nothing more. Roof tiles in the Macaulay Road, Tomb Bridge. Barely noticeable one street over, but enough still to register on my pulses. Red tiles keeping the rain away, holding the heat of the turf fire in, capping the small slap brick house that wrapped its walls around Molly McKean in a warm, protective embrace. I turned my young hand to poetry because there was nothing else for it. Every week at Mass, a press of coats, scarves, and boots carried us over the threshold of Our Lady of Lourdes, Moneyglass. Both of us swept in on the same lumpen tide of simple faith. With good timing, I could join the surge and land up near enough to her to cough out a weak, "Hello, Molly McKean." Near enough, yes. But every time I started to open my mouth, my pummeling heart would knock the voice right out of me, just as it did when I passed her vertiginous in the corridors of St. Olkan's High School in Randallstown. There was nothing else for it. So guileless and smitten, I damned the torpedoes and spilled everything in 3 quatrains and a couplet onto one side of an ivory sheet of my ma's best writing paper. Everything. Using my ma's black and gold waterman. I blotted it, folded it in 2, sellotaped my photograph to it, hair awry, banjaxed vintage Telecaster slung over my shoulder, and sealed my unilateral declaration of love into a blue airmail envelope marked Molly McKean. And didn't I just hand her that envelope the next Sunday, coming out of Mass? Voice still hostage, right? Yeah, but I tapped her on the arm with the envelope, and she took it, and that was that. I turned my young hand to poetry because there was nothing else to be done. That was all there was. And once it was done, it was done. It was enough. I dared not hope for more. Indeed, I did not hope for more. I had dropped every guard and revealed every crushing vulnerability. I was unburdened. I had declared myself. Molly McKean had carried my poem home, brought it in under red roof tiles still visible from our parlor, read it, and hidden it somewhere. My sonnet and my photograph, to hand, there to be examined again, or perhaps just tucked away and forgotten. No matter. It was safe in her hands. I was safe in her hands. For me, it was enough that she knew what she had been given, and how, and by whom. The rest could remain in the lap of the gods. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Frank Farrelly, and I'm very pleased to be shortlisted for the Bray Poetry Prize. My poem is called Mercurochrome. Mercurochrome. He was blonde and popular. I think his name was Charlie. After class he led me to the ruined castle. There were others there I never saw in school. They had cruel eyes and yellow teeth, smoked like types I'd seen outside the bookies, sucking on the bitter truth. One held a cat above the parapet and let it drop. They laughed. I retched, spiraled down the darkness to the street. Traffic loud like someone turned the volume up. At home, I said nothing. My mother mourned my ripped shoes, bewailed the muddied motto on my crest, rubbed antiseptic on my palms, my knees, said this will sting a bit.
Baby teeth. His mistake was leaving his baby teeth inside her drawer the night they left. He tried to console himself after all was said and done that he couldn't have known, aged 8, and yet, loosely, he did. He couldn't name what exactly he had forgotten when the social worker came, went through life full of too many gaps. He spent too long in graveyards in his early 20s, when everyone else he knew was working in supermarkets or cafes. Oddly enough, he wasn't alone. There was a living, informal collective who found themselves walking between gravestones, creating stories for the faded names while they smoked, nodding at the stray cats who came and went. The cats seemed to recognize them as part of their own species, writers, out-of-work actors, the homeless and the otherwise displaced, mentally or physically. In the graveyards, all seemed to become one and the same. These bodies were friends insofar as they recognized him, and he spoke to them. He smoked with them without needing to take or give names, scabbed cans and shared cans depending on the month, petted the cats, smoked alone when there was no one else. He was very skinny, but he had stopped noticing his own body, until it came in one fell swoop, and that was that. She watched the drawer from day to day. Her curtains might have been shut for years. She had lost count. Her hair grew long, black streaked with grey. When had it become split by grey, like deathly fingers had combed through her hair, left the colour in their wake? Spiders appeared in the tresses from time to time. She put up with them as if they were tenants, faintly repulsed that these were the only lives she had the power to crush. Eventually she did crush them. She wondered if, in their tiny brains, they expected more out of life. The bins overflowed. She managed the organic waste, walked briskly out to get rid of it. She'd no patience for maggots. The air was cold and unfamiliar, and she was certain the neighbours were watching. She had let the hedge grow long so that the old woman couldn't peer in at her through the window. When they tried to cut it to spy, she filed a complaint with the guards. She slammed the bin closed, slammed the door closed, and went back to bed. Pushed herself up, looking in the drawer. She opened up a black card ring box, faded with age. Teeth like gravestones poked up from the cotton wool. The man was out in the mist on his way to the graveyard. He was crossing the canal, cheerful enough when the heart attack came. He ended there on the flagstones, choking on the taste of dirt. She buried the teeth in plant pots. She buried them deep, commanding a new child to grow. She read the death notices in the papers and smiled, a spider scurrying across her forehead.
Hi everyone, my name's Jennifer Harrison and I'm a medical practitioner and a poet living in Melbourne, Australia. I'd like to thank the Bray Literary Festival and particularly the poetry judges for shortlisting my poem Costumier for the Bray Poetry Prize. Costumier will appear in my 9th collection of published poetry called Sideshow History, and the collection was supported by an Australia Council for the Arts grant, which allowed me to photograph contemporary street performers in Australia as well as researching Australian sideshow history. We're in stage 4 lockdown here in Melbourne, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to send all my good wishes to you over there in the UK. And here is the poem, Costumier. She speaks at you sideways through a mouthful of pins, her hands busy with ticker tape, tulle and sequins, brushed top hats made from llama wool, a ringmaster's cape hemmed in endangered fur, an aerialist's suit of skin-tight lycra, and a swag of monstrous pink fluff for a clown's pantaloons. She's saving money using recycled lingerie and shirts. Her best friend, an antique French Siegel and Stockman mannequin on a cast-iron 4-strut base, its papier-mâché torso calico covered and pinnable. If she were allowed to choose, she'd prefer nakedness, an isolated beach, crowdless and dangerous, waves like a performance of entropy. No clouds, the undressed sky, her childhood a lick of sea spray, salty and ultimately see-through. Thank you and best wishes for the festival and greetings from Melbourne.
Howling. My mother died giving birth to me. When I was a young boy, I would imagine coming from her body howling while she secretly screamed her goodbye. She was only 26 when she died, unusual at the time. I never wanted to find out exactly what had killed her, preferring to hold the glamour of me being to blame. My father left shortly after, and I was carted to my maternal grandmother, a constant reminder to her of how much my existence cost. We didn't get on. As soon as I could, I hot-tailed it out of there. I travelled around Europe for a while, earning enough money to feed myself. I never settled on any one job, instead learning various trades. I was versatile like that, handy for everything. I probably drank too much and got myself into certain situations that didn't always turn out well. You see, the thing about killing somebody without realising for many, many years that you have done the deed is it leaves one with a certain recklessness. I grew up believing I carried my mother inside me, not spiritually, but physically, as if we were two people merged into one. When I was born, I imagined just before she died, she pushed her life into my body, and there we both happily dwelled. I spoke to her often, asked her advice on things. She was a good mentor and counsellor. When Martina, my ex-girlfriend, flirted with that beefcake, after I had saved for weeks to bring her to that expensive restaurant she was always rattling on about, it was my mother who told me how to deal with it. I did get into some hassle and was put away for a little while, but Mother was right. Martina Breen would never flirt with a man again. Lesson learned, and not an entire waste of time. I learned pottery while on my vacation from the real world, and sold them now at markets. The public loved reformed ex-prisoners. They're so admiring and trusting of us. It makes me smile. I have made friends. They come to my stall each week and chat, asking for my welfare. I've never had that before, and if I'm honest, it's a bit disconcerting. Claudia is an old dear that brings me homemade biscuits that she makes especially for me. Claudia tells me all about herself. She has no one in her life and says she enjoys the chats, as there is no one else she has to talk to. She has told me where she lives, all alone in her house. She doesn't even know her neighbours. She thinks they don't know she's actually there. The other thing about killing somebody without realising it for many, many years is that one wants to do it again, so that one can have the full experience of what they missed the first time. Claudia asked me to tea. I can hardly wait. 2 fingers, 2 splashes of Coke. The ritual is almost as pleasurable as the ingestion. I check the time. 3 o'clock. At 3:45, I can have the next one. I have rules. I don't start until 3. I finish at 9, sometimes 10. And since I'm being honest, sometimes I don't remember when I stop. The blackouts were what eventually made me talk to someone who suggested the 45 minutes. I glance at the clock again, 3:05. Now I'm in a quandary. Is it from my first taste or when I pour? Am I already 5 minutes in, or do I start from now? It's a game I play. By 7ish, I will only go from when I pour, and then I relish in the delay, teasing myself. I can't help but delay. It's the savouring that delights me. Like when Christopher would take me to the edge, but not let me go, and I, hanging on to him, would cry with both pleasure and frustration. Good times. I take my first sip. Christopher hates me now. He will convince Jack to hate me too. Second sip, and it's only 10 past. Must stop thinking bad thoughts. My counsellor told me to relate the bad thoughts to a good memory. Example, when I think of Chris and Jack and all the horrible things that happened, direct my memories away from that particular time and move to a happier time. That hurts more. I write that down. She has also told me to keep a notebook. It's full of questions and comments for her. I sit across from my counsellor and read the notes I scribble down during these 45-minute days. I don't read all of them. With each turn of the page, the writing gets harder to decipher. My notes this week will be that I prefer to think of the bad memories. They don't rip me apart as much. They fit better in my head. I'm actively trying to push the happy memories out. Another sip to dissolve the memory of Jack's face looking up from my breast, his hair matted with my fluids, separated but still one body. 3:25. I hold the glass up. By 8 o'clock, I'll be adding 3 fingers on 1 ice cube. I will keep the 2 splashes of Coke. I have some restraint. I flick my notebook, pages littered with Jack and Christopher's name. Scrawls that I can just about understand. Another sip, bigger than the previous ones. 3:30. The glass is over half empty. My counsellor says I should face up to what happened. I should own it. Another sip. Too fast. I close my eyes and exhale, allow my mind to travel back to 8 months ago. My brain kicks back at me. Hindsight. Such a small word that holds so much. I glance down at my notebook, skim the name of Jack's hospital ward. I finish my drink 7 minutes early.
I wonder if I could still swim. It's not something you lose, I suppose. They say it's easier than walking when your body is frail, that the water cradles you. It'd be dangerous, though, surely, in that sea. And too cold for me, even in this sunshine. The body can't regulate its own temperature very well, you see, when it gets so old. The nurse told me that. If there's a bit of a cold wind, or you don't move from your chair, well, before you know it, the hypothermia has a hold. But then you can easily overheat if the day is humid or you exert yourself. The sea never overheats, does it? No danger of that. That was half the thrill of it back then. That freezing feeling all over your skin and inside you when you waded in. And flinging yourself from the rocks was even better. The exhilaration got into your bones, into your lungs, into your heart. It swelled your pride. You soon warmed up, of course. You got used to the water once you struck out swimming. And no sooner were you back on the beach, clambering up onto those rocks, than the sun would have you heated right back up again. No problems with regulating your temperature then. No, not in those days. The girls would be watching. You'd be aware of their eyes on you. It made you up your game, stirred the devilment in you. You'd strike a pose before you jumped or dived in. And you'd swim that bit harder and further, cutting through the waves like you were Johnny Weissmuller. The girls, though, they wouldn't hurl themselves in. It was too immodest a thing. They'd teeter in from the beach in 2s and 3s and 4s, holding on to each other for steadiness, laughing and squealing. Some of them were strong swimmers, mind you. Herself, she could swim a long way. Fast, too. It was one of the first things I noticed. Not the very first thing, admittedly. I can see her now. In that costume with its tucks and frills. She had no frills herself, straightforward as they come. Her arms and legs were powerful, but slim at the same time. And she'd turn golden as soon as the sun so much as touched her. I know you're not supposed to say these things, so our Maeve tells me, but she didn't half look beautiful in that swimsuit. I mean, you couldn't help but look. Everyone looked, boys and girls alike. Nothing lecherous, nothing like that. It's just that you couldn't help admiring her. I wanted to kiss her the moment I saw her. I wanted to sweep her into my arms like Tarzan gathering up his Jane. I never did. It wasn't me she chose. She'd look at me sometimes, though, when she was on his arm. I think she wondered, too, what it might have been like, the two of us. But it wasn't to be.
Iora from Cyprus, thank you for the shortlisting. This is my story called Pinion. Lizzie leans her chin on his shoulder, whispers, "Geordie boy, I love you," into his ear. Geordie boy, face wide and grinning like a dog in the wind, turns back as she bites his lobe with her sharp white teeth. In the reflex crack of laughter and shock set free from his mouth, blind and deaf in that pleasure-pain moment, he doesn't see the Nissan Navara barreling around the U-bend high on the dusty mountain road. The might of the Nissan's bullguard bumper does its job and tosses their moped, sends it ricocheting like a pinball before flipping them off their axis into slow, slow motion. They fly with Tom and Jerry gravity defiance before she can scream, before the pain, and before a second sudden impact. Then a hurricane of damage switches time up to the speed of light. Lizzie's tanned thighs peel like avocado skin, leaving behind dimpled flesh oozing brilliant red from the vast capillary assault, until a shard of sharp metal shears off the wheel trim and shaves clumps of prime muscle and globules of butter-coloured fat like a hot knife and pate. She skids across the pitted tarmac, loose shingle degloving her bare freckled arms, before she slides across the packed earth studded with sharp stones the size of marble, shredding her back. At the verge, she slams into the twisted trunk of a 300-year-old olive tree, snapping her left femur, both tibias and fibulas, crazy paving her pelvis and symphysis pubis. Her bladder, full from lunchtime beer, bursts like a water balloon. Lizzie never sees Geordie again. No one does, not alive. Only his mother has the courage to gaze upon his body. She weeps for him until the day he dies. She dies of a lung cancer fed by too many through-the-night cigarettes and liver failure from too many whiskey chasers to wash down the nicotine. Because a son is a son, is a son, is a son no more. Nico in the Navara, unscratched in body but not soul, has all his swagger desiccated on that high island road. 10 months later, uncounted bottles of raki later, and a single bullet from his hunting rifle later, he finally forgets. And in the long months and years that follow, raw pain continues to burn Lizzie's young body, flailed and scraped of all exposed skin, except where her denim shorts, too short, according to the widowed landlady of their cheapo pension in the old town, had withstood the onslaught. That tender skin of her buttocks and inner thighs is cloned and grafted, a dermal version of the loaves and fishes, again and again to cover but never disguise the excoriation of her youth and beauty. Only once the pins, plates and screws drilled into her pelvic girdle have done their work, have held her bone fragments together long enough to fuse in her now permanent non-childbearing hips, does she relearn to walk. She never learns to ride again. Thank you for listening.
Hi, my name is Mark Ward and I'm delighted to be shortlisted for this year's Bray Literary Festival competition, and I'm reading my shortlisted poem, Milk Breath. Friar Conrad came to summer, the air constricted. Mother putting on airs for his grace, but even she couldn't stand his cat. A sullen black thing, an unfit heir. It stalked the house, claiming it as his own. It made father sneeze. Brother took the air most days, claiming a dark presence in it. The friar refused to let his room air out. Days gave way to our new sister's screams, desperate for fresh milk and a kind air. We slept in most mornings. The yellowing priest took care of the cat's food. A chill in the air signaled autumn. Sleepless, I reread my lover's letters into the night, walking on air, when a queer thud shook the nursery. The curtains were billowing without air. Nurse was bleeding out and the friar was crying, apologizing for his every error, but the room's air was being eaten by the cat, its hiss sucking out the air from the baby. It's the milk on her breath, the priest said with his last. Full of air, the cat, beast-like, began to float, a void, demanding compliance, wanting the air in my lungs. I managed to close the door behind me, locking it, making it airtight. Only then did I scream. Father found a vacant room, letting in the night air.
Thank you so much to all of our shortlisted readers this evening. It was wonderful to hear you reading your entries. And now we're going to go over to the judges of this year's competitions, Brian Kirk and Edward O'Dwyer, for the announcements of the winners 2020.
Hi, my name is Brian Kirk. I'm on the organising committee for Bray Literary Festival, and I'm also charged with the responsibility of picking the winners of the poetry competition in 2020. And it's been a great privilege and honour to read the poems. We had a huge entry this year. We had over 250 poems entered in the competition this year. And it was a difficult task, as you can imagine, to whittle it down to a shortlist, a long list, a shortlist, and then the top 3. I enjoyed reading the poems. The quality was excellent this year. It was difficult enough to get it down to 30, let alone to a long list of 12. Those 30 poems, I think, were particularly strong. And it was just multiple reads, really, and reading and rereading that brought me to the long list, which we announced the week before last. And then the same again to the short list of 6 that we announced last week. So again, to everyone, I want to congratulate everyone who entered the competition. I know it's not easy, having entered many competitions myself over the years. A lot of times you don't make the long list, and it's disappointing, and it's hard sending work out. But I think it's great when you do get to a long list, or get to a short list, or get to first, second or third. I think as time goes on, it's a great boost to people's writing careers, I think, and it's a fill-up, and it helps you keep going. So I want to congratulate everybody who entered. I want to particularly congratulate those who made it to the long lists and the short list. The quality, again, as I say, of those long lists and short lists were so good. So now it leaves me with the privilege and pleasure to announce the top 3 poems, and in reverse order, if you will. I'd like to announce that in 3rd place is the poem Oystercatcher. This is a beautiful nature poem, and I think nature poetry is becoming popular and important again to us, maybe in a way that it wasn't maybe over the last 10 or 20 years, but it's really important. And this particular poem really reflects the beauty and fragility of life through a nature poem about the oystercatcher. There's some beautiful writing in it. There's a deep understanding of the bird's life that reflects on our lives as well, and an understanding as well of the ecology of where the tide meets the land, and that whole habitat in which the oystercatcher lives. If I can just quote a little line: black and white whistle, sunset bill skimming, no touchdown, no rest, low over the lapping surface under a refracted sunset. We're familiar with these black and white birds, and they are striking, and the poem is striking with short lines and excellent word choices throughout, and real music to the writing as well. So a great achievement, Oystercatcher. In 2nd place is the poem The Value of Cut Flowers. Again, this is a beautiful poem, and it's a poem, I suppose, that is dedicated to the lives of women who have gone before the poet, and it's really a celebration of the knowledge and wisdom and love that these women have passed down through the generations. There's so many great lines in the poem that deal with the practicalities of nourishing and sustaining and flourishing and growing, nipping side shoots from tomato plants, pinching out the first frail flowers, this kind of detail. It's a very wise poem as well, and it's reflected in lines where a tray of seedlings failed, began again, because things can catch up. This poem, for these very reasons, I think reflects maybe the uncertainty of the moment, or the year we're living through at the moment. Late in the poem, it refers to this strange, dry spring when nothing's right, which I think sums up the spring and the year that we've all had to date. But the poem leaves us with this sense of flourishing and survival. It's a very positive, powerful poem. So congratulations and well done, The Value of Cut Flowers. Finally remains for me to announce the winning poem in the Bray Literary Festival Poetry Competition 2020, and I'm absolutely delighted to say that poem is Cat. I think it's a truly worthy winner. It's a remarkable poem. The subtitle to it is The Book of Kells, Folio 34 Recto, which refers to a page in the Book of Kells. So it's an ekphrastic poem in many ways. And it's a poem that also, dealing as it does with a monk and his white cat, it also echoes that old ancient Irish poem of Bangor Bawn. This poem is, again, it's a really, really wise poem. It's really filled with thoughts on life as it is now, even though it's dealing with something that's very, very ancient. But it's also very funny. It's got great humour in it. It kind of compares the life of the monk to that of his cat as the monk works on that page from the Book of Kells, which it does in fact contain drawings of cats and rats as well. But the poem is beautifully humorous, and it closes with a evening falling at the end of the day in the scriptorium, and the cat making a decision and the monk making a decision, I suppose, about their lives. So it's a remarkable piece of work. There's the repetition of "he's not a schoolman," which is a reference to the monk himself, and then later on she thinks she is not a schoolman. The cat is reflected in the same way. So in many ways the cat and the monk have so much in common in the lives that they have and that they live. I recommend this poem, and I hope that, I'm sure there will be many readers of it in the future. And again, I want to congratulate particularly the winner, second place and third, but all of those who made it to the shortlist and made it to the long list in what has been an excellent year for poetry at the poetry competition at the Bray Literary Festival. So once again, congratulations everyone, and I hope to see you all soon.
Hello, my name is Edward O'Dwyer, and I'm here on behalf of Bray Literary Festival 2020. And in this video, I'm bringing to you the announcement of first, second, and third place in our flash fiction competition. I just want to say, first of all, that it was a terrific honor and a joy to be given this responsibility, but also to go through all these entries, and the quality was incredible. But it's a really exciting form, and it's really gathering momentum nationally and internationally. So it was just a pleasure to see what people were doing with it. So the way we defined it, of course, was 500 words, and that is something that changes from contest to contest and from journal to journal. But for our purposes, we're looking at 500 words, which really is very little to work with. So you have to get straight in there, straight down to business, and lots of stories. Really got that, but for me the best stories were the ones that got in and did as much as they possibly could with their 500 words. For me, those were the most effective stories. They were the ones that made the strongest impression on me. So which stories were they? So in third place, or second runner-up, was a story called My Life in 45 Minutes. And in second place, or first runner-up, there's Johnny Weissmuller. And my winning story, and it was actually, there were quite a few rereadings involved to get this absolutely right, but this story came up consistently, even from the first round of readings. It came up consistently as my winning story. So I can say that I'm very happy to declare Howling the winner of Bray Literary Festival 2020's Flash Fiction Contest. Congratulations to the winner. So in these 3 stories, I found that there's a lot of quirkiness, but very, very well measured quirkiness and edginess, and really, really effective management of the limitation. So they got in there, established a beginning, gave a sense of what kind of story they were telling, and carried it out really, really effectively in 500 words. Some powerful lines, some powerful imagery, and particularly in the winning story's case, in Howling's case, there was this really, really incredible sting in the tail. And for me, that really, really sealed the deal. It left a lasting impression. And every time that I went back to the story, reread the story, that sting in the tail remained really, really powerful. So there you have it. 3, 2 and 1. And congratulations to everybody that made the shortlist, everybody who made the long list, and also everybody who submitted stories, because this is subjective enough. And, you know, if your story didn't make the 3 or the 6 or the 12, it might in the next contest. You just have to take that chance. You have to send the story out and believe in that story. And but in particular, congratulations to the winner and to the runners-up, and enjoy the festival. I'll see you soon. Thank you. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for this evening's event, and we want to say a huge thank you to Wicklow County Council as well, who makes our Culture Night events possible. So we do hope you'll join us for our next event, which is happening at 7:30 p.m, and that is 4 poets walk into a bar, featuring Anne Tannum, Fiona Balger, Grace Valence and Mark Ward, and that inimitable singer-songwriter Byrne. Huge congratulations again to our winning writers this evening, and also to our shortlisted writers. So thank you very much indeed for watching.